Welcome back to another installment of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. I'm your host, Sean Meyers, joined by returning co-host Justin Lowery. Justin, thanks for taking time out of the 4th of July holiday to talk a little bit about pro wrestling. Doing anything exciting on this 4th of July?
Talking to you.
That's a pretty terrible holiday, if you ask me. But hopefully we have some fun over the next several minutes talking about Raw with the Raw recap. We'll also touch on SmackDown. And then I think an interesting third segment for trending topics. We have just surpassed the halfway point of the year, so we'll get into our picks for male superstar, female superstar, tag team, and match of the year through the first half a little bit later. But we're going to start with the Raw recap. So let's talk about Monday night. And the first thing that I heard were a lot of complaints about the TV time for one Roman Reigns. Roman was on for, I believe it added up to about 50 minutes total between his two tag team matches and then his backstage segments. So right off the bat, Justin, Roman Reigns, the biggest complaint for most fans is not his in-ring work, but the fact that he's shoved down their throats, that he's always in prominent roles. Doing something like this, not surprising that there's been some negative feedback that there's been too much Roman on Raw.
Well, I almost feel like they were, giving a giant FU to the fans. Maybe. I mean, if that's basically everyone's complaint is that he's shoved down our throats, and there he is in, I think almost like an hour of TV time. Sitting down 1/3 of the show was dedicated to him. That's not going to help the Roman problem. And if they think that's going to help, they're sadly mistaken.
Well, let's sort of break down how it unfolded, because it's sort of interesting when you look at the feuds and storylines he's involved with right now. He's sort of spread throughout 3 or 4 different things. Ultimately, the biggest takeaway is going to be he and Bobby Lashley upcoming in about 10 days' time in Pittsburgh at Extreme Rules. But to build to that, they've sort of done some stuff with tag team matches. The one was, of course, set up in advance, a rematch of Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns against the Revival after the Revival won the prior week. But the other one, impromptu, at least in storyline senses, was Roman and former Shield brethren Seth Rollins against Dolph and Drew McIntyre. And that really, Justin, is to build the Seth Rollins-Dolph Ziggler feud. So do you like the idea that you involve Roman in that to really just sort of have Seth and Dolph really be the focal point in the end?
I actually, you saying getting Roman involved, I almost look at it as getting Seth involved a little bit with Roman because they want Roman cheered. I look at Seth as the top face in the company.
Which seemed like why they wanted to do that Shield reunion in the first place several months ago.
Right, but it seems like every time they're like, oh man, Roman's getting booed a lot again. What can we do to get him cheered? Oh, I know, let's do a Shield reunion because that gets people to pop. And then they cheer him, but as soon as he breaks away from it, they boo him again. So I actually view it the opposite of what you said. I actually kind of like when different storylines, intersect with one another. It gives it a little bit of a fresh feel to me. Like, I like that, but at the same time, I don't need to see the same person on my TV for like an hour.
So they have the Roman and Seth against Dolph and Drew match, and I thought it was a pretty good match. It ended a bit prematurely with the Revival doing the run-in, beating down on Roman, and then Drew and Dolph double-teaming Seth Rollins. So they were building towards other things happening. It makes sense. By the way, I know we'll touch on it probably a little bit later in one of these segments, as well as next week on the preview for Backlash Extreme Rules. Man, I'm so bad at remembering the names of these secondary pay-per-views. But it just seems like Drew McIntyre is a guy that's going to be a main event star, and they're sort of teasing him against Roman, stuff like that. But the biggest takeaway, Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler just seem to have tremendous chemistry recently, whether it be one-on-one or in tag matches. Uh-oh. What do you...
So that makes sense. Can you see me?
Yep. Give it to me again, okay. Justin.
Yeah. They both, are great in-ring workers, so it totally makes sense that they, have good chemistry. I'm looking forward to their Iron Man match. I actually would like it if it was an hour. I know sometimes hour matches can really drag, but I think those two, given an hour, could be really fun. Half hour is actually, I think, going to go by pretty quick. I'm enjoying it. I still don't know how Dolph got that spot just out of nowhere, but if anything, the matches have been delivering.
Now, fast forward to, I don't know, about an hour later in the show, we mentioned Roman Reigns had another match. It was teaming with Bobby Lashley, his future opponent, as they were going with the rematch against the Revival. And good opportunity once again for the Revival to be in a prominent spot. So many months had passed with them really not doing anything. Now they get two marquee matchups back-to-back weeks. And this one, the big takeaway, of course, was the Roman Reigns trying to be the hero, do it all on himself, did not want the help of Bobby Lashley. Roman started the match, stayed in there the entire time, refusing to make the tags. And the Revival looked, I think, pretty good in the process. Now, the match did end sort of in dubious means with a DQ, with the Revival having the double beatdown. The ref called for the bell, and then they took out Roman Reigns as Bobby Lashley, frustrated that he wasn't tagged in, eventually just walked away. So this is the point where you've already seen Roman in one tag team match. Now this one, he's, in a sense, both in storyline and in reality, hogging the spotlight by working the whole match. One, it has to be sort of tiring for him. But are you digging this Revival sort of just riding the coattails of Roman and Bobby Lashley the last couple of weeks?
I dig that part of it because I like the tag team. And maybe to the common fan, this gives them some credibility because, I mean, they've been butchered since they've joined the main roster. I mean, some of it was unfortunate luck. One got injured when they came back. The other one got injured. So it's good to see that they're, getting a high-profile, appearances on the show. But when it comes to Roman and Lashley, the whole feud is a bore to me. Lashley's a bore, extreme bore to me. So anything he does, I honestly am not interested in. The match still might be all right, but the feud itself is boring as all hell to me.
And it looks like it's going to be a pretty significant feud because the general impression is the winner of that's going to probably face Brock Lesnar. We don't know if it'll be at SummerSlam, but I would put money right now that either Roman or Bobby Lashley, the winner of that match at Extreme Rules, will go on to SummerSlam. So they're sort of building it backwards with, instead of having Roman and Lashley really go at it as enemies, they're trying to put them together, and we're seeing the team fall apart. So they've basically done the exact same thing now 2 straight weeks in that regard.
Right, yeah. Honestly, it could have been the same episode of Raw. I don't know. I don't like it, but like I told you, everything Lashley does to me is a bore. And Roman, he's hit or miss with me. Especially his backstage segments and stuff like that. But I just get the feud done and over with.
Now, let's jump into the segment that closed out Monday Night Raw. It was different, I guess. It's sort of a throwback type of feel to what Vince McMahon really loves, and that's the good guy just destroying things and wreaking all sorts of havoc. In this case now, in 2018, it's not Stone Cold Steve Austin, it's Braun Strowman, who seemingly every week is doing something absurd against a bad guy that he's feuding with. And recently, being on the receiving end has been Kevin Owens. After he flipped over Kevin Owens' car in the parking lot the prior week, Kevin Owens tried to escape. This time, not able to do so. He tried to hide in a porta-john. Ultimately, it did not work out for him. Braun Strowman found him, dragged the porta-john through the backstage, out to the ramp, and then ultimately basically shoulder tackled it upside down. Kevin Owens, of course, came out looking like a new member of the Blue Man Crew, which a lot of people were confused. It made sense to me because you have that blue dye in there. I guess people didn't realize that, and they were wondering why he was blue. But every now and then something like that is okay, and they've done it now where it's almost becoming every week with Braun. One, the whole storyline's sort of backwards. Isn't he really completely a bully at this point? And two, are you getting to the point now where he's not going to be taken seriously if he does eventually go against someone like a Brock Lesnar?
Yes, yeah. I know I want to say one thing about the Porta John. Isn't it amazing that it was completely clean? Not one person has used it. That's really good luck for Kevin Owens. But yeah, Braun, I like to see more of the monster type. They do a little too comedic with him. He does pull it off well. I'll give him that. I was okay with it, like you said. I mean, I think the 12-year-olds probably loved it. I mean, it was clearly juvenile humor, and Vince does love that type of humor. It was okay. To me, it actually looked like Braun struggled a couple times moving him. I don't know if you noticed that.
He had to kick things out of the way and whatnot.
Grip and stuff. I mean, I don't think it went as smooth as they had hoped, but I mean, Braun pulled it off pretty well.
Do you see this feud leading to anything other than Kevin Owens just being squashed in the end?
No. I think it's, again, we don't know exactly what to do with these guys. I mean, it's a B pay-per-view, and they're probably spinning wheels until SummerSlam. I don't know what these guys got planned for them for SummerSlam. I mean, both are out of the title picture. I mean, like you said, it looks like Roman or Lashley. And maybe this feud will extend into SummerSlam with some type of different stipulation. If that's the case, though, then somehow Kevin Owens probably has to pick up some type of fluke victory at Extreme Rules then.
Well, so without getting too far ahead, because we are focusing on Raw here, I think you can make the argument there's legitimately 3 guys, maybe 4, that you could see challenging Brock Lesnar next. I think Roman's the obvious one because that's what you never bet against WWE picking Roman to be the guy challenging. And he never really finished that feud because of the ending at the Greatest Royal Rumble with seemingly Roman getting robbed. We just mentioned Lashley could be a candidate if he beats Roman Reigns. I don't think that will happen, but it could happen. And then probably the 2 guys that deserved it the most are Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman. So what direction does this company ultimately go, and what do the other guys do if they're not part of it? Or do you make it where maybe 3 of those guys are in a fatal 4-way against Brock Lesnar like we saw last year around this time?
I mean, I'd rather see that fatal 4-way, but they're always going to pick Roman, like you said. It's clearly Roman. They're not getting off that bandwagon. Maybe they should. I mean, Seth is hot. I mean, they should have gave Braun the strap months ago, and I think they missed an opportunity because he was at his peak hotness, and they blew it. Well,
they gave him the strap. They gave him the tag team strap for one night.
Don't get me good at that, Nicholas. Yeah, no, they blew it because they're so narrow-minded, fixed on Roman instead of giving it to anybody else. And do we really want to see Roman and Lesnar again? I mean, that seems like that's the only match that Lesnar ever comes back for.
I want to see anyone beat Lesnar.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean,
but yes, Roman would not be my first choice. He would probably be my 3rd choice.
Right. It's stale, and quite honestly, if he's finally going to beat Lesnar, the fans are still going to boo. I mean, I think they're sick of Lesnar too, but they're just going to crap on the whole match. That's what's going to happen. It's just going to happen once again.
Well, we'll figure out what happens there maybe over the weeks and months to come. But one more thing I wanted to touch on Monday Night Raw, and it sort of agitated me. It was with the women, and no, we're not going to talk about the counseling session. At least not. We're going to focus on the counseling session between Bayley and Sasha Banks, which truthfully probably could have been pretty entertaining if they really made an effort. Didn't seem like they made much of an effort. So it was just pointless. But speaking of not making an effort, this drove me absolutely crazy. The past 2 weeks, Nia Jax, Alexa Bliss, they're having the second go-around of their feud. Seems kind of redundant, being that they just seemingly wrapped up the feud about 6 weeks ago. Now it's right back at it. And they don't have a lot of new material to go with. However, they have tried intertwining other women in this. Mickie James with Alexa Bliss. And with Ronda Rousey suspended, they have been using Natalya with Nia Jax. And that was the case this past Monday again. It was a one-on-one match between Nia and Mickie. Not a terrible match, although if you're trying to make Nia this dominant force that they've been building up, she really had a tough time with Mickie James and struggled, taking 10-plus minutes to get the victory. However, my biggest takeaway is the fact that Natalya is now paired with Nia, and they're buddy-buddy, which if you go back about 4 weeks, those two were really going at it, and actually Nia caused an injury to Natalya. Now I know she technically went to check on her and everything. This is the issue that I have on the main roster with the women, is it just seems like any given week they're just going to switch, between a heel or face or friends, enemies. It just doesn't seem to have long-term continuity where they just throw them in there. Any given week they could have a completely different role that contradicts what they've done previously, and I think this is a great example of it.
No, I agree with you, and I think it was a couple of weeks ago, when she hurt her knee. It was like the right knee or whatever. I don't know if you picked up the week after on Raw, they had the different knee wrapped. So even week to week, the writers got,
Well, I saw that, but I will say one thing. The wrestler has to alert them, this is not the, that has to be on Natalya too.
How does she not remember, no, guys, we attacked this knee last week. It needs to be on this side.
Yeah, if they start wrapping the wrong knee, you need to say, no, that is not correct.
Right, that's so horrible. But I just had to say that because that irks me. But, the whole week to week, who's a heel, who's a face? Nia Jax is the new Big Show. She's had more turns here in the last 3 or 4 months. It's ridiculous. And Natalya, like you said, Ronda's last feud was with Nia Jax there. They had the match. And they're supposed to be best friends, and now she's buddy with Nia. It makes zero sense whatsoever. Unless, there's probably some type of turn down the line for Natalya. What type of turn, I don't know, because I don't know if she's a face or a heel right now.
Well, she's seemingly been a face since she's come to Raw. Although you get the feeling she is going to stab someone in the back.
Yeah.
But if you go back, I had mentioned on the other side, the heel side, Alexa and Mickie James. Remember, they had a feud, and then all of a sudden, Mickie, with no explanation, went from being a good guy to siding with Alexa Bliss again, and they never even made the effort to at least give some after-the-fact explanation. They don't even generally do that. And I don't know, as fans, how you can get behind a superstar, whether you're supposed to cheer for them or boo them, if you don't understand why they're even in that situation that they're in.
I agree. I mean, how are we supposed to get involved in an angle, be emotionally attached to something, if we don't have a reason or an understanding why said wrestler's doing this? Why did Mickie join Alexa? They were in a feud. Well, all of a sudden, why are you now friends? Why are you now bullying, picking on Nia Jax? What made you change your mind? You said she was an evil, person, but now you're doing the same stuff. It's just like WWE's don't worry about that stuff. No one pays attention to that. Just go out there and do it.
I 100% believe that is pretty much the message that they tell some of these wrestlers in any given week. Before we wrap up the Raw recap, anything else that stands out to you, Justin? I'd mentioned briefly the Bayley-Sasha segment. I wasn't a fan of the fact that it seems like they're delaying what could have been a great momentum boost from the prior week with that rabid attack that Bayley had. Now they're sort of back to square one where you don't know, is Bayley technically the heel? Are either one of them a heel? Are they even going to ultimately have a match? Or are they going to stick them back together as a tag team in 2 weeks? I like some creative skits like what they were trying to do, but in this case I didn't think it was necessary, and I think it sort of fell short. That was something else that I thought stood out about Raw. Anything for you, good or bad?
I'm actually a Baron Corbin fan. I do like his work.
Since he started, or is that a more recent fandom?
Well, as time's gone on, he's grown on me more and more and more, month after month. I think he's improved. I just like his character. He's pretty good on the mic, and I have interest in him and Finn's feud. I do find it entertaining.
Last thing I'll say, Elias with a 30-second backstage song, that's not enough for him. Get him back on. Even if you don't have a set feud, have him go out there, wrestle a 5-minute match, sing a 3-minute song. 8 minutes, I think you could squeeze him in there over some of the other people that are getting time.
I agree. I mean, clearly they don't have anything for him right now. They have no idea what to do with him.
I think we could have said that at any point in the past 6 months, though.
Yeah, but if you get 30 seconds to sing a song to Liv Morgan, Blue tongue. I mean, that's a good 30 seconds right there.
I suppose. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Raw recap. As I mentioned, we're going to have plenty more content coming with the SmackDown summary, as well as trending topics. We will take a look at the first half award winners, if you will. Superstar of the Year, Female Superstar of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, and Match of the Year through the first 6 months. But for the Raw recap, that's going to do it. We will be back momentarily with another segment here on the 5 Star Podcast of Wrestling.